How do you feel about planning? Do you find it easy? Do you find it super helpful? Is it something you do gladly, or is it cumbersome, difficult, and you avoid doing it? Well, as you might know, in my book, Beyond Efficiency, I describe how you can create your personal planning system that works exactly for you. But what I will talk about today is how Alan Lakein, the author of this book, How to Get Control of Your Time and Your Life, how he can tell us how we can find the right level of planning for us. So let me share with you his findings. And as usual, I'm combining my own thoughts and ideas. So control starts with planning, Alan says. And I said in a previous video that the more control you have, the more freedom you will have. So first, the very, very first thing to be aware of and to fully accept is that your time is limited, but your imagination isn't, and your commitments most often aren't. And this is something I also tell my clients when I talk about time. I tell that most of us are trying to solve an impossible equation. We still behave as if our job kind of is possible to end on a 9 to 5 day or 9 to 6 or 9 to 7 or whatever. But in reality, work is unlimited, be it at home or being at work. So we're trying to solve this impossible equation to fix everything, but we do have limited amount of time. We have every week 168 hours. So that means you need to choose. And as Alan says in his book, planning is decision making, and choosing what to do and not to do is decision making. So to really get control of your life and thereby bigger freedom, you need to learn how to become a good decision maker. So let's talk about why that's not necessarily simple and easy, because a lot of people think planning should be easy. Why am I still having difficulties with it? Well, it's not as easy as you might think. Not to say that it's really complicated, but we need to give it the time and effort it requires. So if we look at a few generations back, not that long ago, people's lives and actions were dictated by fixed conditions. So Alan mentions in his book traditions, religion, social class, place of birth, all of that decided very much how much choices you had. And I also added here the availability of tools and technologies. For instance, Hans Rosling has given the example of how much life changed when the laundry machines came, where you could wash laundry very quickly and easily compared to the amount of time it took before. So things have changed, and we have a lot more decisions to make now. So not that long ago, fewer decisions to make, less levels of freedom. Nowadays, the opportunity for making choices, often complex and difficult, have multiplied. So it's not strange that you might feel, why am I struggling with this? Well, you're having a lot more choices to make. And in one way, we love it because we have more freedom. But it also means we need to learn how to handle all these levels of freedom. So if we look at these choices, good to understand, and deciding can be difficult. It's not strange, not something to feel bad about if it's hard. We tend to have short and long-term conflicts. A lot of people are aware of this. Right now, this feels like a good idea, but if I don't do this, I'll have a trouble tomorrow. So we have the short and long-term conflicts to deal with. We might also have rational, emotional, and physical needs that compete. It would be really wise of me to go to bed now because I'm tired, but I haven't finished what I had planned to do, and someone is waiting for me to do that. That might be both rational, emotional, and physical needs. We also are aware that everyone wants some of our time. That's also something to take into consideration. In all of our lives, even if it's quite different from the times 1 or 2 or 3 generations ago, but still there are some uncontrollable elements of our lives that is just out of my control. And it's so important to be aware of which these are. So learning what areas of your life are within your control and which are not, except that will give you so much time and energy. And this comes back to another book, another really good book, and that's this one, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey, he talks about the circle of influence, that the more we focus on what we can control, the bigger our circle of influence grows compared to worrying about all the things we can't control. So let's accept that deciding can be difficult, and you alone can decide how you spend your time, at least when we're looking at a life level. Because of course, we can be impacting other people, and then we want to take that into account. But if it's you and you alone can decide how you spend your time, what Alan Lakein describes in his book are 3 approaches. You can drift. Whatever happens, happens. And you let things happen, and you might, if you don't have a strong desire, or you don't have a clear vision, end up like a message in a bottle on a beach somewhere where you hadn't planned to be at all. You might drown in, I get so overwhelmed, there's so much, I'm trying to do everything, but I don't manage to do anything. Or you can decide. I decide how to use my time. And it isn't harder than that when we understand that, hey, that's all I need to do. I need to get good at deciding. And it's good to understand that the time, how you use your time, is the result of not one decision or 2. It's hundreds of thousands of choices of what to do and how to do it, and you do it all the time. So how do you decide today? You probably make some habitual choices. Oh, this is what I've always done, so I do it now. And one really important thing here is to not cling to the past. That means things change. I noticed, and you probably did, that I had a certain amount of things I did pre-kids. And then when I had 3 children, small ones, it made no sense to do it the same way. And now that they're getting older again, it's time for me to reevaluate how I use my time. So habitual choices is really good to continuously revisit them. Why do I do what I do? Is this still how I want to use my time? A related way of making your choices is to do it by default. Well, whatever happens, happens. And of course, whatever happens, happens. But do I want to influence what happens or not? If I just make default choices, I don't. We often also make the demands of others decide what we do. That's not so strange. We do what other people ask us to do. But sometimes we do only that and we forget something else. We might make choices in the spur of the moment. And they might be great if we have become really good at listening to our intuition. But if we haven't, then they can also be completely rash, crazy decisions. So afterwards we go, what was I thinking? And finally, what we really want to have is we want to make conscious decisions. I want to consciously decide how I use my time. And then we come to something that in this book is called Lakein's question. And of course, in my own book, I talk about a question that is very similar, which I thought was funny when I read Alan's book. And seeing that my what I have been working with is actually timeless, because he wrote his book in 1973, and I have been teaching this since 2010. So the question is, according to Alan, what's the best use of my time right now? Super powerful. I talk a lot about this in other videos, so I won't go into it too much. But he says, if you just remember this question, what's the best use of my time right now? It's similar to my question that I suggest, how do I want to use my time? That you ask that of yourself often. And then if you don't know, how he says, then the best use of your time is to find the answer to that question. So when should you ask this question to yourself? Well, he has written a number of suggestions on when to use this question, and I added the one with pink background. I suggest you ask it when you start your day. How do I want to use my time? And then you add that to your daily plan. He also says, whenever you're not sure you're using your time well, and you might feel like, should I really be doing this? Then it's time to ask, okay, how do I want to spend my time? Or what is the best use of my time right now? It's also great to ask after you've been interrupted. So you were doing something, you were interrupted, and then you want to go back. Okay, are you going to go back to what you did? Or are you going to do something that the interrupter wanted you to do, or something else? When you notice you're being distracted, you might work on something, or you think you're working on something, but you're actually starting to think about something else, or you're getting a pling in your phone and that sounds much more interesting than whatever you're doing. Then it's good, like, oh, wait, what's the best use of my time right now? Also, when you feel torn, oh, should I do that? Or should I do that? Or maybe that, ask yourself the question. And very much a good idea whenever you transition from one activity to another. Maybe you've been to a meeting at work and the meeting is finished. Time to ask that question. Maybe you've just come home. Maybe you're just about to leave. Great time to ask. Another time is when you expect diminishing returns, as Alan calls it. So if we go to the good old 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, if we think about the fact that 80% of the value of any task is typically achieved already after 20% of the work, oh, you're done. Maybe you don't need to fully complete. Have you received as much returns as you can? Very similar to his other suggestion, when you risk becoming a perfectionist and you notice you're kind of just polishing and polishing, then it's good to keep track on progress and evaluate, is it worth continuing? So that question is the one that helps you make these conscious decisions. So turn asking this question into a habit and let it become second nature to you. Then it's not going to feel awkward. It'll just be normal for you to continuously do that. And instead of drifting or drowning, you become someone who decides. Another final point here is only good planning will let you reap maximum benefits from minimum time investments. So too many don't give planning time because you think, I need to get started. I need to get doing. But actually, the planning will help you and reap maximum benefits from minimum time investments. However, it's good to realize it takes practice to become a good planner. It's okay if you haven't figured it out yet. Let it become a good part of your practice. And planning and making choices is hard work. And as I just mentioned, yeah, we had fewer decisions in the older days. Now we have more. And every time you make a choice and plan, yeah, you need to think, you need to decide, and you need to understand your own criteria and priorities for what you're doing. So don't get angry with yourself if this isn't super easy for you yet. All planning, according as Alan describes it, has two parts. First, you make a list of things to do, and then you prioritize the items. Then, of course, we have a lot of things like how do you put it into your calendar? Do you want to have different types of lists to follow it up? There are lots of ways to do that, but the basics of any planning system is a list of things to do and a prioritized items on that list. As Alan says, many know of to-do lists, but few use them well. So these are some of his advice, his pieces of advice. So he says that he suggests that you use a daily one and let it guide your actions throughout the day, similar to my own recommendations on how to plan. So I suggest you have a daily, weekly, and a monthly plan, and that the daily plan includes appointments. When have I agreed to do something, and where and with whom? Your top 3 desired outcomes, and then a list of bonus tasks. So those that you can do should you be ready sooner than expected. So apart from him suggesting that you have a daily to-do list, he says you keep one list, not items written on different lists in different places. So if we are aware, this book was written in the 70s, almost everything was on paper. Now almost everything is in the computer or phone or whatever you're looking at this video in. Still, it makes sense to not have a whole bunch of different lists, be they digital or paper, and not have it all complete. It doesn't mean that you can't have different tools. For instance, I have one list for my week, what I want to do in the week. And then I dive deeper into details in my Trello board, which is kind of a digital Kanban board, the way I use it. And if I do things that are in sequence, I have one is depending on the other, then I use mind maps. So of course you can use several different tools depending on how you want to work with the items, but you don't want to have an incomplete list and then that you have, oh yeah, I forgot something else, but I have that on list 2 or 3. And the third piece of advice is don't clutter your mind with lists. Give it space for creativity by having the list on a paper, possibly digital instead. And yes, this is something we sometimes forget, or we think I should remember. But why use your brain for that? Your brain isn't made to keep track or score, or a lot of knowledge you can have somewhere else. It's made to create. Let it create. Put it on a list. It's not like showing that you're no good at keeping track of things. It's actually a good use, efficient use of your brain. Then we come to prioritizing. So we have our list. These are all the things I want to do. Then we want to become good at prioritizing, because he says no list is complete until it shows priorities. If we want to guide ourselves when we look at our lists, he suggests an ABC system. You can use whatever system. I think the good part about the ABC system he describes is that it kind of gives you two levels of priorities, because he says, of course, the most important things are A, and then you get B, and then they have the less important C. Then within the A's, you can still do A1, A2, A3. So essentially, you get two levels of priorities when you use the ABC system together with a numbered system. An important thing, and this is super important when it comes to all planning, priorities change over time. He says may change over time. They're very, very likely to change over time. Everything changes all the time. So ABCs may change over time. Today's A may become tomorrow's C. Last year's A activity may be this year's C activity. So don't look at anything you write in your plans or your priorities as holy, and this is the way it's going to be always. Things change. And of course, we need to remember that it's never worthwhile to make a big effort for a task of little value. So always consider the value. Otherwise, you become one of these over-organized people or overdoers who just do things, but don't focus on the actual value. And if you think it's hard to prioritize because you doubt your judgment, whose is better when it comes to your time? In general, yours is the best. However, of course, sometimes what you do impacts others. So I've added my own reflections here. If others are impacted, you can, of course, involve them. If it's something related to the family, if it's at work, you might collaborate with your co-workers about priorities. And I thought this would make sense if I do this first and then that. What do you think? Or you have lots of people wanting your time at work, and you can't fulfill all of it. Maybe you want to involve your manager. So yes, of course, it's your judgment, but sometimes you need to involve others. Something else he talks about, that it's good to keep an eye that things are changing. If you notice that, yeah, I've kept this as an A level or a A1 level for a long time, and I still don't really want to do it now. I always postpone it to later. Then the question is it really still highly prioritized? Is it really the best use of my time? And it might be, and then we get procrastination, and I'll devote another video to that you're not doing it even though it is a good idea. But it may no longer be current or valid, and then it is wise to reprioritize. Something I talk about in my book: planning is everything, the plan is nothing. It doesn't matter if you change the plan, but that you do the planning is the important part. And as I told one of my clients recently, who had noticed that the work she had taken on was way bigger than she thought, I said, don't worry about it. You will always replan. Expect to continuously replan. That's the nature of the work many of us have today and the lives we have. And Alan mentions, and I agree, many aim to do as many tasks as possible, but then they often do a lot of C tasks and are not effective because they feel effective because they did many things. So they kind of look at quantity rather than quality of what's been done. And you might have heard Simon Sinek talk about this, that every time you tick something off, you get a little bit of a dopamine kick. And sure, that's good, that's great, but don't make that overrun your priorities. So don't worry about completing your list. And this is so hard for people. I planned this and I didn't get it all done. No, but that's not the point. The point is not getting everything on the list done. As Alan calls it, it's not completing the list that counts, it's using your time well. So by regularly working on A's and B's, you will feel good about working on top priority things, even if there are a few undone C things. On the other hand, if you work lots on your C's and you tick off, you might still have this feeling at the end of the day because you didn't get to do the A's and the B's. So if we really understand the importance of planning and why it isn't as easy as you might have thought, remember, no matter how busy you are, always take the time to plan, because it will repay the effort many times over. And it's so easy to say, no, just get going, I don't have time to plan. It's really, really, really working. And this is something super simple you can do within an hour or so. So the best time to plan, according to Alan, is early in the morning or at the end of the day. I say the same. I prefer the end of the day, so then I plan the next day. And the way I prefer that is because then I can at the same time see what I did get done in this day, and I can feel happy about that. And I can more easily let go of something. If I haven't completed something, then I can just put the remainder to the next day. So it helps me wrap up one day. My husband, on the other hand, he doesn't want to think about the next day. He prefers that the next day, early in the morning, that's when I sit down and look at how I want to plan the day. Alan and I suggested at the end of a week, you plan the next week. And I also suggest that you look ahead and get an overview of the whole month. What Alan then mentions is include your lifetime goals in the plans. Otherwise, you'll just do all the things that are important here and now, but you won't work on your lifetime goals. And I'm saving that for another video to talk about lifetime goals, but that they are an important part of your plan, that we can say already now. So that was what I wanted to tell you about planning. Control starts with planning. Remember, your time is limited, but everything you can do is not. So you need to decide what to do and what not to do. If you find this difficult, not strange, things have changed. We need to make a lot more complex decisions today than we used to do 1 or 2 or 3 generations ago. And be aware, only good planning will let you reap maximum benefits from minimum time investments. So it is worth your time. I hope this is helpful for you. So good luck with your planning.